Somewhere in this pile is the anonymous letter that was sent to me. I think this is it. My name is handwritten in pencil, misspelled. So I can read parts of the letter, but I can't read all of it because it has some identifying information. It says today is 12/17. There is a girl at blank shelter in blank state. She wants an abortion, but ORR will not allow it. The government can't ban people from accessing abortion. I called the Department of Justice when I found out this was happening, and I said, you can't be serious. You cannot be physically obstructing someone from accessing their constitutional right to an abortion. And they said, so sorry, that's our client's position. And I said, well, then you will not be surprised when I challenge it in court. I want to know how he was appointed, who contacted him, how he came to work for ORR, things like that. Yeah. And then it's who has he talked to about abortion? VP, president? Why can't I ask? I can ask that, right? Yeah.
Will they reporter please swear in a witness?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
This minor had been raped, correct?
Well, she claimed to have been raped, yes.
Do you have any reason to disbelieve her?
No.
This minor had thoughts of self-harm.
She expressed something along those lines, yes.
You also believe that abortion is a sin.
What does that have to do with anything?
It has to do with a lot. I get to ask the questions. Mr.
Sure.
Tomlinson can object. So my question is do you believe abortion is a sin?
Yes.
Can object. He's testified in the past that he does not let religion guide his job.
I'm trying to understand what the policy really is here with respect to abortion requests.
Okay, then let's talk about the policy.
Okay. I'm trying to understand whether there is any abortion request that you are ever going to approve.
And the answer, which I've answered, is I don't know.
Hopefully I don't. My first sentence. Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, the Secretary's decision rested on a single assertion that it was Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, the Secretary's decision rested on a single assertion that don't do this tomorrow. Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. The Secretary's decision rested on a single assertion that it would provide more accurate citizenship data to the Department of Justice. But the administrative record revealed precisely the opposite, that it would result in less accurate data for the Department of Justice. And the Secretary's explanation for his decision ran counter to the evidence and was thus arbitrary and capricious in three respects. I'm going to try to work my way through my points and periodically interrupt myself with a random question. I'm going to try to give my answer and then pivot back to my main points. It'll be worse for Voting Rights Act enforcement purposes. No, that's not the case. Yes, that's right, but imputation would be more accurate. Well, the standard is the ordinary, arbitrary, and capricious standard under Section 706.
Have you argued in front of the Supreme Court before?
No.
Did you expect to be doing it?
No.
Do you think you're gonna win?
I don't know. All right. It's gotta be muscle memory now. I'm gonna do one more.
Can you explain what a moot is?
A moot is a practice oral argument session. Colleagues and sometimes friends from outside the organization, co-counsel, play the role of judges and just pepper that person with questions.
There's no moot pump-up music?
No, not for moods, for the actual argument itself, I think. Although I have been playing on repeat in my head Tom Petty's I Won't Back Down. Shall we? Kendall was supposed to find a podium.
We put the brief in 3 days ago, so just, I'll do my best.
Okay, counselor, what relief are you asking for?
Your Honor, we are asking that the children who have been separated already be reunited with their parents.
Courts have held that an agency must fully and accurately set forth the methods by which it has chosen to act.
The president said we need to ban this because of the tremendous cost. The amount of money the military pays to treat erectile dysfunction dwarfs the amount of money it pays to treat gender dysphoria.
The government has taken the position that only sponsorship or voluntary departure are the mechanisms for accessing abortion, but those mechanisms are completely outside of the minor's control.
One thing I think that bears mentioning that's not in our co-plaintiff's brief, that's not how I want to put this. I'm having some issues today.
The government says that all of its detention choices are discretionary and that therefore I can't review it.
Right, Your Honor, but that's wrong, Your Honor. Due process always constrains discretion.
6 states face a substantial risk of losing a seat in Congress: California, New York, Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Illinois.
You've got somebody who identifies as male and has female genitalia. Why does the military have to deal with all that?
We have to make him feel like he cannot sign off on these little kids sitting all by themselves. He has to have a mental picture of these kids.
Do you think you have a way to make a pretext argument that's about discrimination?
One.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Horn, the host of The Frame on KPCC and the podcast Hollywood the Sequel. We've got a big group in front of us, so I'm going to introduce the lawyers first, the stars of this story, and each lawyer can wave his or her or their hand. Bridget Amiri, Joshua Block, Lee Gallant, Dale Ho, Chase Strangio, and then our filmmakers, Elise Steinberg, Josh Kriegman, Eli Dupre, and last but not least, Kerry Washington. So Kerry, I'm going to start my question with you. This is a film that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January. If there was some sort of coda, update, postscript that you would put on this film, what would it say? How have things changed since the film premiered, for better or for worse?
You know, I think the fight remains. You know, that's what I would say, is that we're still in the trenches. We're still in this battle, that the film is a phenomenal example of the courage and resilience and tenacity and intellect and badassery that it requires to be in this fight. And we're still in it. So I think that's what I would say is I wish that we weren't still in the fight. I wish that all of our press about this film was postscript about a time that once was. But we're still deeply, deeply in the battle that is being revealed and exposed in this film. And also, I think, you know, to sort of, you know, in deep gratitude to our lawyers, no matter what administration we were facing at this moment, we would be in this battle anyway, because the ACLU has done work to defend our civil liberties and our rights, regardless of who is in power in any given time.
This is a question for any of the filmmakers, Elise, Josh, or Eli. You can answer it. And the question is, when you go about starting work on a film like this, you're casting it, you're figuring out who the lawyers are that you're gonna follow. Do you cast based on the lawyers or the cases and the issues? Which one started the kind of process of where you wanted to go? And did you end up following more lawyers and narrowed it down as you were filming and through post-production?
I think when we started off, I don't know if some of you guys know the story, but when the way it began was that I was at the Brooklyn courthouse the night that 7 days after Trump was inaugurated and he enacted his Muslim ban. I was at the courthouse where Lee Gallant was arguing to block the Muslim ban, and when he emerged with his fist raised high, I felt like this was the story that needed to be told. We needed to be inside with these lawyers. And Lee was actually the first lawyer that we started following. But our vision was to be with the lawyers on the ground in this epic battle, something we'd never seen before. And we did not know what would unfold. We did not know which character or which person we would start following. And but it ended up that we found, one of the biggest cases, the biggest civil rights battles of our time. And so I think it was like one of these classic documentary stories where you never know what stories you're going to get.
Eli and or Josh, I want to ask you about the conversations you had with the lawyers about what you wanted to film, what they were comfortable filming, because obviously you're going to be a fly on the wall, not just as they're talking about legal strategy, but some of their home life. What was the conversation? What was off limits? And how did you sell yourselves in terms of the access that you wanted to get to make the film?
Well, it's funny. I mean, we actually went to the ACLU before, with Lee was one of the original conversations, but we went to the ACLU to pitch on access, to see if they would be open to letting us in to be embedded for potentially years, telling these stories. And, as we're sort of verite documentary filmmakers, so our style is to be 24/7 on the ground all day, every day in everything. With lawyers, that means, strategy sessions, meeting with clients, and then also going to homes. So, I mean, we had this vision, which we gave to the ACLU, and their initial reaction was, that's a lovely vision, but there's no way you're ever going to get access to this organization, which, Eli, Elise, and I took as sort of a good starting point for the conversation, and we considered that encouragement. And then the conversation just sort of continued from there, and over time, folks, got to know us and got to understand sort of who we are as filmmakers and as people and what we want to do. And I think that sort of everyone, institutionally at the ACLU recognized that this was a risk worth taking. This was a historic moment that really needed to be documented. And then when it came to, meeting all these lawyers, I think that they, it's a matter of many long hours with them and them getting to sort of know us. And I think that they would be able to speak to, their feelings about us better than we can. But, you develop comfort over time and just kind of a sense of presence if putting in the hours.
I want to ask this question to Bridget and Chase, and about the idea of having these crews follow you around, and what was important in terms of the story you wanted to tell, not just about yourselves, but about your legal practice, and what were your reservations and what were the important things that motivated you to participate?
So I would say that the most important thing that motivated me to participate is that I wanted someone to document this period in our history, that it was so important for people to capture the atrocities that the Trump administration was committing on people's lives and civil.
Where are you? I know what you're gonna say, and no, I'm not coming to the party for Dana. Amazing, because she broke up with you for no reason, dude.
Hi, this is Dana. Leave me a message.
Sorry I ghosted you. Maybe we can talk tonight at the party.
Obstruction ahead.
No.
Oh my god.
New route detected.
Jake, can you go to her Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on it.
That's some guy's can right next to her, man. You're tripping. That is a baked potato. No, 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 no! You can't tell Mom what I'm about to tell you. I crashed my car, man. Really? I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere. Come pick me up. I will be there. Would you please talk to me for 1 minute? Why haven't you left yet, man? 45 minutes away, okay? I will freeze to death if you don't come pick me up.
Andy, where are you?
Watching this right now, it means that I never made it out of here. It's 25 miles. This is the worst day of my life. Not anymore.
Liberties. And so I really felt it was important, and I agreed to do it to capture that story, and both for it to be told now, but also in the future as a cautionary tale to make sure that we can never let this happen in our country again. And I was obviously, concerned about attorney-client privilege and other things that we talked about, but the filmmakers were great when we said that they needed to leave a room because we need to have a conversation with just the lawyers or just our clients. They did it, and we really built that trust over the years that they were filming, and so that was something that just kind of happened organically.
Chase?
Sorry, it still takes me like a good 10 seconds to get off mute. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was very much being aware of how few trans stories are on screen in sort of holistic and thoughtful ways. And that is one of our barriers to achieving civil rights protections for trans people is sort of, there's a lot of horrible narratives. There's a lot of misframing of our existence. And I knew that we had, incredible clients in this case. I knew that there was, incredibly important stories to tell. That was also a source of reservation. I don't so readily want to sort of cede my transness or my client's transness to non-trans lenses. And so I think I was nervous about that, but I also felt a responsibility as a trans lawyer to sort of show a sense of myself as an advocate for the community too, and as a person who has a full life, because I think there's lots of ways where transness is cast as deviant or in victim world. And so I think one of the things for me was I'm going to show a full human, like with a family, with love, with hate, with people who hate me, and put all of that out there alongside our incredible clients. So I had many reservations, and particularly about our clients and protecting privilege and all of that. But that was sort of, we could set up firm boundaries. I think once you seed your personal story, that's out there forever. And so having to contend with that is definitely an ongoing process.
I see the questions from the journalists coming in, and I will get to them in just a minute. I have a couple more things I wanted to cover. Lee, I had a question for you, and that is the backdrop of what's happening in the courts. And that is that the Trump administration has appointed, I think, at least 200, if not more than 200 judges at the district court and court of appeals levels. And those are appointments for life. So what does that mean in terms of trial court and appeals court, about what that means for lawyers like you well before you get to Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one of the things that people don't pay enough attention to. I mean, very few cases reach the Supreme Court each year. Most of the work, the civil rights work, is done in the district court and the court of appeals. And most of those issues will not get to the Supreme Court or not get there for years. And so I think that's a definite concern, that this administration is trying to move the lower courts so far to the right. And I think what's going to be a struggle for us going forward. The one thing I would say, though, is I think it's important for civil rights lawyers not to treat all the Trump appointees as monolithic. We have recently had some real success before Trump appointees who were very smart and dug into the issues and said, wait, what's the Trump administration actually doing here, and held that it was unlawful. So I think it's important that we just not write them off all as a slate. But the larger point you're making is critical, that we can talk about the Supreme Court all we want, and that's obviously important. but a lot of the work that's going to get done, most of the work that's going to get done is going to be in the lower courts.
Dale, I want to ask you about law students and about the next generation of lawyers. And because you teach, I'm curious what you're seeing in the classroom about interest in public interest law. Is there a material shift that you noticed maybe in the last year or two since Trump was elected, or maybe even more recently with the police killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd? Have you noticed that there is a new conversation or new enthusiasm about public interest law that might have been absent even 3 or 4 months ago?
Conversation over the last few years is very different than what I was seeing when I first started teaching about, just about 8 years ago. I mean, the kinds of students who take a class with me tend to be ones who, are really interested in public interest work. They tend to be folks who are joining the profession because they want to dedicate themselves and their careers to, moving the ball forward. On either civil rights issues or just kind of progressive reforms broadly. But I'd say that the tenor of the conversations has changed pretty dramatically from, people who are interested in maybe kind of, nibbling around the edges of institutional reform to people who really, really, really want to see, I think, a massive structural change in the way that institutions operate in this country, and conversations about institutional racism, which were, I think, things that were always a part of the classroom discussions when I was teaching. They're almost taken for granted now in a way where there's a shared vocabulary amongst the students that I don't know if was always the case even as recently as 5 or 8 years ago.
I have a question for Josh Block, and that question is, not that long ago, for people who remember presidential elections, George H.W. Bush complained to Michael Dukakis that he was a card-carrying member of the ACLU, which Michael Dukakis, to his detriment, I would argue, embraced. How would you say the position of the ACLU is today? How is it seen? What are its obstacles in terms of the work and how it's received? Because there's such a kind of blurred conversation now about what the rule of law really means and what the Constitution does and does not do.
Well, I think that we're engaged in so many issues today across so many levels. I think that, and I think the country has seen, especially in these times, how all that's connected, and how all our freedoms for reproductive health or LGBTQ rights or immigrants' rights, how they're all dependent on each other, and how, and especially Dale's litigation with the right to vote. And so I think that you can see in the movie that sometimes tough questions come up, such as the situation with Charlottesville, and how do you advance certain constitutional rights while still at the same time not sacrificing other constitutional rights. But I think from my standpoint, the response to our work in response to such the extreme abuses by Trump over the past few years has been, I think, morally clarifying in some ways and uniting. I think people have joined the ACLU that said, they never would have given it a dime before. But that's what happened when you have a president that tries to ban Muslims from entering the country.
I'm going to get to some questions from the journalists who are watching. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. I would ask you in advance of how it's pronounced. I think I'm going to get this one right. Deborah Wallace at Thrive Global has a question for Kerry. Kerry, the question is, how did this movie change you, and how do you hope it changes the audience that watches it?
Wow, it's such a great question, Deborah. Thank you. I would say one of the ways it changed me was just that I now get to call these incredible human beings, both the filmmakers and the lawyers, friends. So I'm just like super lucky. But I think, I've always thought of the ACLU as really, for the most part, a faceless organization that does this heroic work, sort of like up on a hill or in a building somewhere. I didn't have, even though I've spent a lot of time even working with the organization, there's a new intimacy that I think I feel with these lawyers because of how beautifully made this film is, and because of how courageous all our lawyers were in sharing of themselves so intimately. So really feeling like I know these heroes in a human way has had a profound impact on me. One, because I really am so inspired by the work they do, but also when you really witness their humanity, you know, having to hang their kids upside down because they're trying to work from home, like Chase is doing. We now all of us who have young kids at home now in COVID relate to, or Lee not being able to charge, you know, his cell phone down. You know, all of these very human moments, train wine, they make you realize that each of us in our small section of our world, of our lives, like, we have the power to be heroes with whatever gifts we have, because they're just human beings, like these extraordinary people who are saving our civil liberties and saving our asses every day. Like, they're just people. They're our neighbors. They're our cousins. They're our friends. And so, so I think it begs the question, like, what can I be doing more with my skill? I may not be able to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court because I didn't go to law school, but can I produce more work that is that centers issues that are important to civil liberties? Am I somebody who bakes? Can I bake muffins and cookies and raise money for the ACLU? You know, can I dedicate my ability to edit, to help create content for organizations that are fighting for civil rights and civil liberties? Like, whoever you are, you can be part of the solution. And these heroes are really an example of that.
I think the Kerry Washington bake sale would be a big hit. So I'm gonna buy a cake.
I'm getting really good with my slow cooker in COVID. I'm doing a lot of cooking.
Instant pot sourdough. I know where this conversation could go. This is a question for any of the lawyers, and if more than one wants to take it, and if you want to argue about it, that would be even great. The question is from Dan McPeak at Endeavor's podcast. The question is, one of the lawyers talks about speech being all right for people you agree with. Is that the problem with free speech and cancel culture today? How do we even have a conversation?
All right, I guess I'll take two hard questions in a row. Still bitter over the last one. I think, one of the great things, about, the ACLU is, we protect speech for everybody, but that speech includes criticizing other people's speech, right? So, Chase talks all the time about how, just because the ACLU chose to represent the organizers in Charlottesville doesn't stop, us or the deputy legal director of the ACLU from publicly saying that they thought that was the wrong decision. So, I think that part of free speech is free speech for everyone, and things like boycotts, things like, speaking out and harshly criticizing things, that's part of free speech too. And so I feel like this organization is very committed to that in all its forms.
Any of the other lawyers want to add to that?
I mean, I would just add, I think one of the great things about the ACLU, as Josh mentioned, is our ability to disagree with each other, both publicly and internally. And we see that in the film. And I've been outspoken in my disagreements with some of our decisions as an institution. And I think for me, especially now, one thing we have to contend with is not everyone has the freedom to speak equally, that people's bodies and lives are criminalized, their ability to survive is threatened by structures of power that have existed going back to the founding of this country, and that we have to also contend with power. And, and I think I've been really struggling with watching the scene, as I mentioned several times, about with the people calling us, and just kind of sort of dealing with the levels of violence that are really different in terms of how we are attacked as individuals. And that affects your ability to speak. If you feel physically threatened for your survival, your speech is constrained differently than someone else. And that doesn't mean that it's always wrong when we represent someone who has a lot of power in their hateful speech. Maybe some of us think it is, maybe some of us think it isn't, but I think having a conversation about power is also essential. And I think we're having that conversation differently after Charlottesville, and you can see it in the film, and it's ongoing internally.
This is a question for any of the directors. It comes from Eric Althoff of Screen Comment, and it's, how do you hope a film like this can stand out in a crowded marketplace, especially at a time when everyone is home due to the pandemic? are the filmmakers hopeful that given current events that we can see, that we can and will see the change that the fight is all about?
I mean, I think that one thing that helps this movie is that we have really exciting. I was very scared at the beginning that we were going to do a movie about lawyers and lawyers were going to be boring, and I didn't. I don't think we knew that we were going to get a little action movie, and it's very exciting for us. I mean, it's what you pray for as a verite filmmaker, that you find subjects who are also characters, who have that sort of visceral spark. It was an exciting movie to make, and I think it's an exciting movie to watch. It's nice to be able to do something that feels important, but doesn't feel like medicine. If that makes any sense. For the three of us, Josh, Elise, and myself, it was a rare pleasure to be able to spend the last 3 years with people who we find so inspiring, but also fun and interesting. And I think it's a special sauce.
Was there anything in the making of your Anthony Weiner documentary that kind of laid the groundwork for this film? Even though they're somewhat different stories, did they share some sort of common elements that you were able to take advantage of as you were making the fight?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things we love to do as filmmakers in this particular type of documentary is to, hitch ourselves to individuals who are compelling and interesting and, have something interesting going on and see what unfolds and kind of anchor the story in the day-to-day experience of those individuals. But through doing that, you get to look at these broader themes and trends and bigger sort of epic events as they're unfolding. So, with Anthony Weiner, obviously it was about him and that experience that he went through, but it was also a look at our media culture today and the political circus as it has in some ways intensified and become even more intense and insane. And so similarly, we love to do that in this film. Is we're obviously looking at these big epic stories as they're unfolding in these lawsuits, but we're doing it through the lens of these incredible individuals, like really on the ground day to day, and that's the style that we really love to kind of revel in.
This is a question for either Lee or Dale, and it comes from James from the Queer Review. Dale says toward the end of the film that the ACLU can only do so much, and it's up to the people to, quote, turn the ship around. Is there anything that you would recommend people do if they're fired up after watching this film, but unsure how they can make a difference?
I think it's hard to identify one specific thing. Everyone kind of contributes according to their own gifts, but I guess what motivated that comment was this sense that as much as we were relishing the victories that we were winning, that you got to see depicted or documented in the film, I think we all knew that for the most part, what we were doing was fighting a rearguard action, right? And that's not to say that there hasn't been some tremendous, amazing progress in civil rights over the last 12 months. And, the one case that I think about in particular is the employment discrimination case that Chase worked on in the Supreme Court. But I mean, most of what we've been doing over the last 3 years has been playing defense, right? Trying to prevent, stop, mitigate these, human rights and civil rights atrocities that have been committed by this administration and others over the last 3.5 years, and to really make the kind of progress that I think, at least I'll just speak for myself, that I went to law school hoping to see achieved in my career. I think we need a level of public engagement that extends well beyond the courtroom. And I guess I'll say is that, the last few months, they've been maddening, infuriating, depressing, all of the above in so many different ways. But I've also felt a tremendous sense of hope from the activism that we've been seeing, particularly around the movement for Black Lives. It's just really, really, really incredible and inspiring, and it does make me feel like, it makes me feel like the the kind of broad engagement on issues of civil rights beyond just people in courtrooms or in classrooms that we need to see happen in this country is on the cusp of happening.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, on a sort of very practical level, you can go to aclu.org, and there are ways to get involved, different ways. And I think people should just think of it as no one way to get involved. And it could be a big thing, it could be a small thing, but public engagement is so critical because any sort of lasting structural change in the civil rights area has to come from the public and not just from the courts. But it can be anything from, you know, you're tutoring one kid, or you're donating to one thing, or you're going down to the border and volunteering for a week, or you're joining a rally, or you're donating financially. And so there's lots of different ways. And, you know, with ACLU's website lays out some of them, and there's additional ways. But the one thing I always caution people, especially young people, is not to feel like the problems are so big, you can't solve all the problems, so there's no reason to do anything. I think that's a real danger when the problems get as big as they have, is that people think, well, these are just too big for me to get involved. You need to just try to do one little thing if you can help one person. And that's the way we need to go about it. I think you can't get paralyzed by the thought that I can't solve all these problems, so I'm not going to do anything.
Probably include voting in that thing, a list
Yeah.
of things that you might want to do.
Yeah, I wanted to say, John, if it's okay, I wanted to just step in. Yes, I think what's so exciting about Dale's comment at the end of the film is that realization that as much as we can spend like a joyous, entertaining, gripping 90 minutes in this hero worship of these lawyers, the reality is that we are the solution to the problems that exist in our own communities. And the fight is about each of us stepping into that fight. And that means voting, and that means filling out your census, which I know there are more questions for Dale on. That means, you know, as Lee said, when you wake up in the morning and you say, oh my God, I don't know what to do because I'm scared about immigration. I'm scared about reproductive rights. I'm scared about LGBTQ community. I'm scared about the census. I'm scared about voting. Like the one place I'm scared about police violence in Black communities. The place you can go where they are checking all of those boxes, doing work on those issues every single day is the ACLU. So if you're gonna make a $5 donation, if you're gonna make a $1 donation, if you're gonna go to one place to click the .org and find out what your action list is for the day, like go there and know that you can, by aligning yourself with this organization, you really are looking out for everybody and living up to those 3 words of we the people, you know, really fighting for those words to include all of us. That's what the ACLU is doing every day. And I'll just say one more thing, which is when the question about, you know, like how do we hope to stand out in the marketplace? I just want to turn that back to each of you journalists who are so generously and graciously joining us today. Like you are part of how that's going to happen. So if you're moved by the film, if you're moved by what you've heard today, like don't sit at home and wonder how the word gets out. Get the word out. You know, call your fellow journalists, post about it. Really make sure that people are hearing about this very important and like not just important intellectually, but like important to our hearts, like this film that our hearts really need right now. So I turn that back to you all and say, like, we will stand out in the marketplace if you stand up and make sure that we stand out in the marketplace.
This is a question that could be for Bridget or any other lawyer, and it comes from Ben Price at Kids First. There's a brief interaction where someone asked Ms. Amiri if she has pump up music going into a moot court argument. So for all the lawyers here, as you're headed into an argument, and I guess it could be Supreme Court or it could be arguing a summary judgment motion, how do you hype yourself up? What do you play? What is your go-to playlist, or how do you get in the mood?
Yeah, so I've always listened to fight songs going into court ever since I started going into court, and I've also, you know, you saw us practicing in the mirror, talking to myself, things like that. So in the movie, I did have Tom Petty's "I Won't Back Down" just on repeat in my head and on my playlist. But I've also had some, you know, other choices, some more mainstream than others, including Eminem's "Lose Yourself" and you know, you have to bring your courage of your convictions into court, and music helps me get pumped up.
Any other lawyers want to chime in?
I mean, I usually listen to like one or two songs on repeat over and over again, and it depends on whatever, I happen to be listening to at the time, but I'm normally just trying to stay a little bit loose before a court appearance. So like the morning of the Supreme Court argument, this is one of the only times when I told the filmmakers I didn't want them to shoot me by myself. I did a little bit of yoga that morning, and I was like, no one needs to see me with my really, really bad form doing yoga in like workout clothes the morning before arguing in the Supreme Court.
I thought it was going to be listening to a Celine Dion song or something like that. It was yoga. Any other lawyers want to comment on that? I have a couple more questions. Okay.
We did a Supreme Court playlist for the Title VII case where we put out all of our songs, and it was very popular. But I'm like invest in trans artists all the time. So Shea Diamond and other trans artists, because that reminds me to who it's about.
This is a question for, I think, any of the lawyers. It comes from James Lindor from Red Carpet Crash. For the lawyers, it appears that public interest or outrage has been at an all-time high since Inauguration Day. How has the public involvement negatively or positively affected you and the ACLU as an organization? Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I've been there the longest, I think. This is the closest I think we've had to a real sort of civil rights moment since the 60s, just on the issues that I work on family separation. That so revolted people that people took to the streets, and it wasn't just liberals, it was conservatives, it was, everyone. And I think that enormously helps. It helps create a narrative to go into court, but it also helps keep the administration from doing even more extreme things, sometimes pulling back. There's obviously practical ways in which it helps the ACLU through donations, which we couldn't otherwise continue to do our work. But ultimately, that public outcry and public involvement is the most critical thing. I think for me, the most frustrating times I have doing this work are not when I lose cases, but when I can't actually get anybody to listen to what's going on and to get engaged in what's going on, whether it's the media or the public. And so it's absolutely essential that people get involved. And I think, as Dale said, it's been heartening to see that if there's any silver lining to what's happened the last 4 years, it's that so many people have gotten engaged in these issues.
I have a question for Dale. And Dale, it's really about kind of, where facts end and where, truth begins, or however you want to define that. I'm going to read you a tweet, and I think you can guess the author. Mail-in ballot fraud found in many elections. People are just now seeing how bad, dishonest, and slow it is. Absentee ballots are fine because you have to go through a precise process to get your voting privilege. I think we can agree who the speaker is or the tweeter is. But when you have somebody conflating and confusing absentee and mail-in balloting, how do you get past people understanding what the issue is when there's so much?
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
He was always different than every member of Congress. Everybody knew what he had done. He was John Lewis.
We're marching today to dramatize to the world that hundreds and thousands of Negro citizens denied the right to vote.
Congressman Lewis gave us the blueprint to organize and to legislate.
The reason why he's effective as a leader is because he's lived it.
We made a decision to march in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion from Selma to Montgomery.
You are ordered to disperse. This march will not continue.
I was hit in the head. My knees went from under me. I thought I was going to down the bridge.
If John Lewis, as a 19, 20-year-old, wasn't doing what he did, I would not be here.
We will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
The whole time he was in the movement, it was frightening, knowing the danger, knowing what could happen.
You cannot replace a John Lewis.
He's the most courageous person I ever met.
Too many people struggled and died trying to make it possible for every American to exercise their right to vote.
He challenges the conscience of the Congress.
Bring common sense gun control legislation to the House floor.
40 years later, John Lewis continues to inspire us.
Are you with me? Let me hear you. 3 civil rights workers that were murdered for trying to help people get registered to vote are looking down on us.
This is a time for action. That's what I learned from John Lewis.
There are forces in America today want to take us back, but we're not going back. We're going forward.
Much subterfuge about what words mean and about misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, just first to that immediate point, there's literally zero distinction between absentee and mail-in voting. They are the same thing. The process for engaging in them is precisely the same. So the president votes absentee, members of his family and his administration vote absentee, vote by mail. They just don't want everyone else to have the same option. But you're right. One of the things that's been so maddening over the last 3.5 years is the absence of a common set of facts that we can all agree upon and, have debate proceed from there. I guess that's one of the reasons why I've gravitated, in my career towards working in courtrooms as opposed to other fora, because at least in front of a fair judge, right, facts matter. Right. We had a case that the filmmakers followed for a little while and ended up not really using in the film in Kansas against a man who was the head of the president's commission on election integrity, his voter fraud commission, which was designed to cook up these, falsehoods about voter fraud to try to justify restrictions on voting. And this is a guy who went around the country for years saying, millions of non-citizens are voting, Hillary lost the popular vote and whatever. But when we got him in court, he had bupkis to support his actual, to support his assertions. And we were able to, I think, really shine a light on just how there was no evidence to support any of these falsehoods about election integrity in the country or the lack thereof. And that's, I guess, one thing that we still have going for us, at least for now in the courtrooms, is that truth still matters, facts still matter.
This is a question for Joshua. The film focused on rights in 4 different realms: abortion rights, immigration rights, LGBT rights, and voting rights. If you were to identify The Fight Part 2, the sequel, what would some of the issues be that are either percolating now or you think are going to be fundamental rights issues in the months and years ahead?
Well, I guess criminal justice and criminal law reform, I think, are huge. I think, again, the inequalities there based on race and many other characteristics are sort of drivers of inequalities like throughout all these areas. So that's obviously huge. I think, unfortunately, all 4 of our areas, I think we can continue to look forward to active litigation, regardless who's in office, if not by this president, then by the Attorney General of Texas. So I think, maybe we'll at least have cameo roles in the fight too. But I think these are all issues that it's important we all stay engaged in, regardless of who's in office. And that's sort of what we're here to do. We've sued every administration and we'll continue doing it.
Any of the other lawyers want to identify an issue that you think might be something that is bubbling up right now?
I mean, I would just echo what Josh said. The only thing I would add, I think there's probably a misimpression that if Biden wins the election, so many of these issues are going to disappear, and it's not true. Whether it's no Democratic president is going to do everything we want, what we believe should be done on immigration or any of these other issues. And then there are also the states that are going to be doing stuff. So I think, that's one thing that we need to guard against, is that the public disengaging the minute if President Biden wins the presidency, that they completely disengage.
Question from Deborah Wallace at Thrive again for Kerry. Kerry, what about your producing role entices you to produce another film, and do you have some subjects in mind?
I think the team, you know, I also woke up the morning after the decision in New York regarding Trump's Muslim ban and thought, like, who is on the ground with the ACLU? Like, who is going to be filming these incredible, heroic lawyers in this moment? And when I found out that it was the team who made Wiener, I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. How do I get in bed with these guys? Not literally. And so I think a lot of it is that, you know, it's really like the quality of people that you're going to be working with, because producing is not easy. You have to really be passionate about the work that you're doing and the partners that you're doing it with. For me, I have to. And so I had such a deep belief, obviously, in the subject matter and in the work that the ACLU is doing, but also in these really brilliant filmmakers to do what they do.
A question for Eli. Josh referenced the case that Dale referenced the case that you'd been following that you didn't include. Editorially, what were the biggest challenges? Because you probably had a lot more footage that you can squeeze into a 2-hour minus documentary.
Well, obviously the challenge, we'd never done anything this epic in scope, and weaving together sort of a tapestry out of all these stories is the lift. What was surprising and fun is that how many sort of moments of action and comedy. I'm really excited. I was listening, Dale mentioned a case that did not make the movie where he was fighting Chris Kobach in Kansas. And we actually just prepped a scene for the extras that will go out of Dale absolutely eviscerating some, we cut between him practicing. I don't want to say an intern. It's a young lawyer who just looks withering under Dale's nonstop verbal assaults, and then the actual a deposition that he does. And it was so what was the challenge was fitting it all together and making it harmonious. The fun was that it was as rich and varied material as we got to work with.
I have a question for the filmmakers. It comes from Dan McPeak at Endeavors. On a lighter note, how did the directors get Gustavo Santaolalla to come aboard? And is the fact that he is an immigrant add to the film's message?
Gustavo, I mean, we could not have been more thrilled that we had him. It was like a dream come true. Eli had been temping with his music. And at one point, Kerry, we were talking with Pilar, and we were like, you know who? She's like, who's your dream? Who's your dream? Who's your dream composer? And I was like, well, it would be Gustavo. And I was like, I don't know if we'd ever be able to get him. And she's like, go for it. And we reached out through an incredible music supervisor, Mary Ramos, and he just immediately responded. He felt like this film spoke to him. He's very passionate. He has his opportunity to score many films. And for him, I do think that his personal experience shaped his interest in scoring this film. And he gave the film a depth, an epic quality that I feel like, and soul that we're just so grateful to have his voice.
This last question
I just gotta jump in. That score was actually a collaboration between Gustavo and Juan Loki, who's also a genius, and the two of them together were very, very. And anyway, Juan needs a shout out. They were exceptional to work with, and the music is stunning.
My last question is for Kerry. And Kerry, the question is, when you make a film like this, are the rewards and satisfactions different than as an actor? And even though they're kind of apples and oranges, is there something that you take away from a project like this that is materially different from acting in something, even if what you're acting in is really good and important? Does it satisfy you in a different way?
Oh, I wasn't muted. I'm glad I wasn't making. Oh man. Yes. I mean, I think for me, when I first came to acting, it was a lot about, this is when I was really young. I think I was drawn to acting because I was drawn to the opportunity to be somebody else and not myself, and as I've sort of matured as an actor, I've come to learn that a lot of acting is really about being willing to show more of myself rather than hide. So I really love documentary work because it is about other people. And it is about, acknowledging that even in the most honest work I could create as an actor, I'm always trying to imitate documentary. I'm always trying to come close to what documentary film does, which is, capture absolute truth on film. So the role of the actor is to approximate or to reach for the art of the documentary. And so it's really a joy for me to be able to get to do the real thing.
I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the journalists who joined us online. And I want to call out everybody who made the fight, producer Kerry Washington, directors Elise, Josh, and Eli, and the stars of the story, Chase, Bridget, Josh, Lee, and Dale. The fight. Thank you all for your time. And thanks for making the movie.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.